Hi.
Hi.
I'm so thankful to you for joining me because I am on my creator path. I'm in that space of trade not paid. And I want to help other people learn how to level up and get to the next step.
Yeah.
And you started with a viral TikTok and turned it into a whole brand.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know who you are, how do you even explain who Alicia McCarvell is and what you do?
I honestly don't even know if I've actually niched how to explain who I am. It's an interesting question because I get the luxury of just being myself every day. So I mean, I'm a content creator. I'm based out of East Coast Canada. Nova Scotia is my home. I like to create content that makes people laugh, makes people feel good, or challenges the way they think about their bodies. And yeah, it all started with a viral TikTok. And my husband and I just kind of said, we don't try now. When do you try? And we just jumped in and started creating, and people latched onto it. And 5 years later, it's blown up to something bigger than I ever could have imagined it becoming.
I think that's so incredible because number one, you took the leap and took the chance. Number two, you've stayed authentically yourself, which I think for me as a creator has been hard, only because I think I have one foot in this idea that I'm going to have to go back to corporate again. And what are they going to do when they see these videos of me being my like weird self? And then the other foot is in the creator space of I have to be my authentic self in order to grow this account and grow a community of like-minded people, because clearly just being surface level isn't being relatable.
Yeah.
So I'm in this weird space. When you went viral, were you working or were you out of a job at the time? I can't remember.
So both, I guess. So I had lost my job, and then I had decided to take a year off because I've been working since I was 12 years old, like in some capacity. And I didn't want to rush into anything. So I started creating within that period of time. But between the period of time of that viral video and my platform blowing up, I had already gotten another full-time job at that point doing accounts receivable. So I had basically downgraded from what I had been doing before. I interviewed. I had never done accounts receivable before, but I considered myself good with people. So I was like, if I can come in at 8, leave at 4, nobody calls me. I don't have to take care of people. I was just so tired because I had worked for a large fitness company for almost 8 years of my life. And I was in charge of people there, and I was in charge of my own club, and I had a lot of responsibility. So I was ready to not have that responsibility. So I did start doing accounts receivable. And then I was very much in the same position that you are now, is that I was half in the door doing accounts receivable and half in the door doing content creation. And I just kind of had to say, like, I can always come back to a job. I can always come back to this type of work, but I can't always have the opportunity to grow my own brand and my own platform. I didn't have that opportunity until that moment. So I actually decided to quit my job that I had to do this full time, which the irony in all of that, losing my job and then less than a year later choosing to quit a job, was a very, very mind at the time.
Oh, 1,000%.
Yeah.
Because you're betting on yourself. You're not helping somebody else grow their brand. This is all on you.
Yeah.
You get out of it what you put into it. And I don't think people also understand how hard content creation is. And I don't want people to be like, oh, woe is you. Oh my God. We are the writers, the directors, the editors, the producers, right? We're the marketing team. We're everything.
Yeah.
It's a lot that goes into it. And then when you start getting brand sponsorships and ad deals, right? Then you have these other expectations. So when you first started, did it start where people were approaching you for like a lot of trade? Hey, Alicia, we'll give you this product. Can you review it or throw it into your videos? Like, how did that even start? Where does this start for me?
Yeah. So it definitely starts with the trade part. It starts with we have this product. we want you to try it and then post it if you want. I was very leery of that immediately anyways, because there's two sides to this. uh, you always want to value your work. And luckily for me, my platform had blown up so quickly that my platform was already worth money at that point. Like I had already had such a following that I knew it was worth something. But it doesn't really matter. And what I've learned over the last 5 years is it's all worth something. I can have a platform of 1.2 million people on Instagram, but it can be less valuable to somebody, to a brand, that of someone who has like 50,000 followers if they're very niched. So like, to explain that is, if someone comes to me and says advertise this volleyball, and I have a 1.2 million people that I can advertise this volleyball to, but I don't play volleyball. I don't talk about volleyball. Yes, I have a massive audience, but then you find a volleyball athlete who has 25,000 followers. Well, it doesn't really matter what they do. It's always going to be more valuable than my 1.2 million, because people are following them for that specific. So I had to kind of reevaluate how I viewed certain things and where I picked and chose my trades. Because sure, a trade for a product that is useful to me but won't sit with my audience is fine, because I can do that. But if it's a trade for something that I know my audience is going to get a lot out of, then that's a valuable thing. So that's where I've kind of had to learn a little bit on both ends. And I picked and chose. It's a very interesting field to be in content creation, because you also have to build relationships with brands. So you don't ever want to shut that door permanently, but you always have to have your own back. So it becomes an interesting balancing ground between, what are you doing for me? What can I do for you? How can we do this together? And how can we make sure that both sides of this is feeling mutually compensated for what we're doing? But yeah, trades 100%, but fall in with the trades that you know that are going to niche well with your audience, so that you can start to build that credibility in your space. And then once you have your stats, once you know what converts, once you know what your audience wants, then you can kind of go to other brands to say, hey, this is what I'm doing now. Let's work together. But again, it's an interesting thing. There's really no right or wrong. It's just kind of what fits your brand, and understanding that some things are more valuable than others in your space.
Did you sit and make a list of like, these are the things I use every day realistically, and brands and sponsors that I would love to partner with? And then do you sort of use the item organically and then start to tag them to see if they notice? Or because you had such a huge platform, were you able to just be like, hey, reach out to whoever and say, let's do this?
You'll always have to do the first thing. I do that yearly. Yearly, I will make an inventory of products that I'm using, brands that I want to work with. I'll slide into their DMs personally and say, "Hey, I made my list for 2025. We haven't been able to work together yet. I would love to work with you in 2025." So I still do basically my own cold calling, I call it. So like I do my own, but at the same time, I'll always, at the very beginning, I would tag every brand that essentially I was using, that I was talking about, just to kind of place myself on their radar, so that they knew that it was something that fit into my life. And it can go any which way. Like, there are a lot of creators that have said, I drink this every day, balls in your court, and tag the brand, and then 2 months later, there's a brand deal. The internet is very interesting like that, because it loves a success story. It loves a funny beginning. It loves watching those types of things resonate and grow. So yeah, it can be a little bit of both, but it will always be the first. It will always be taking inventory on what you use, especially if you want to stick to authenticity, because I want it to naturally fit into my life. Sarah, the Burst Papaya, she's taught me a few things along this journey that have really helped me. And one of them was that people typically have to see things 7 times before they'll actually purchase or before they'll actually click or dive into what something is. So one brand deal is not necessarily going to give you the conversion that you want on one specific product. But if it's a product that I talk about and then all of a sudden I show up with a brand deal, then it does have that place. So again, it's a little bit of giving work for free, but also in return hoping that those brands are going to recognize that and want to put a dollar behind you and go from there.
I appreciate that because I think right now we're in, trade not paid and then also affiliate, right? Like everyone's like, let me give you an affiliate link. And it's like the amount of time it takes me to like create a video that will feature this in some way, even organically or in a vlog or UGC generated, it's still time. And like that, like 20% commission, is that worth it? So did you start saying no to affiliate stuff, or do you like to double down on your own affiliate stuff, which is like the Amazon links, the LTK app? Like, where did you sort of like figure out where you fit in with affiliates as a creator?
So I technically don't have any affiliates right now. I agree with you. Affiliates, depending on the brand and depending on where it's coming from, um, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So you have to be mindful of that. Is it worth putting in the work for that brand? Are they reciprocating that on their end? And just being, I mean, don't get me wrong. If it's a product that you use every single day, or if it's something that you use regularly that's money out of your pocket, an affiliate link works if the brand doesn't have a budget. But you have to be aware of when a brand doesn't have a budget or when they're taking advantage of you for work. And it can be a little bit of both depending on where the brand, if it's a brand new brand that's starting up, it's a product that you love and you like, and you're very aware that they don't have budget to work with you, you have to make the decision on whether it's worth helping them build in hopes that one day they will be able to compensate you, or just be realistic with the idea that they might not ever be able to. And again, that's a personal preference. Um, and you kind of have to find that world of like, do I think that an affiliate link for a company that I can Google search and know is making billions of dollars a year is worth it? No, I think you have budget and you should put that, you should give that to your creators if you want them talking about your product. Do I, the mom and pop shops, the smaller businesses that are opening up, those ones, usually they're pretty honest. I like to start every conversation by asking, hey, we have this product, we're wondering if you want to try it, blah blah blah. And I'll always just reply with, what's your budget? What's your budget? And they'll be honest. Majority of businesses will be honest with, I don't have a budget, or we're brand new, we don't have money, we're looking for help. I expect my brands to be as authentic as I am. If you're going to ask me to put my name on your product or your brand, then I don't want you to lie to me in conversations about your brand. Tell me that you're struggling. Tell me that you need support. Tell me that you just don't see the value in influencer marketing yet, because then that's a challenge for me. And I like to just start it with what's your budget and then just kind of go from there, because the other thing you have to remember as a content creator is that the person on the other end of the email, on the other end of the phone call, their job is to get your work for as little money as possible. And that's just business. Anybody who lives within the marketing space, their job is to get work for as little as possible. And it's not malicious towards you as a content creator. It's not a personal thing. It's just they have a budget and their job is to get as much out of that budget as possible. It's like planning your wedding. You've got $50,000 to plan it. Of course, you're going to shop around and see what baker can give you a cake for a price that seems reasonable or less than another baker. So yes, you're going to be kind of looking for those. So again, I had to kind of wrap my head around that. Like, it's not me. It's marketing. That's how this works. So I just always start with what's your budget, because then that's clear and concise, that that I know my money, like my work is worth money. So let's talk about that. And then if you have something to give, then let's see if I can make that work. And yeah, go from there.
I love that. I also think I learned that I have to be okay with a no. that I have to
Yeah.
like, no, I can't do this with you. I think
Yeah.
what I'm coming from was like 2024 was like all the yeses, and it's overwhelmed me. It completely burned me out. I'm not making any money from doing it. And I am slowly getting attention from local brands, which is good,
Yeah.
to cover stuff. So I like the partnership, but it didn't help me pay bills. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things where like, okay, I'm obviously not doing the right thing. Have you found that there's there's power in a no when you're working in this space?
Yeah, of course. I mean, what shall be will be, and I think that that's kind of something I've learned. I'm very lucky too. Like I have a management team, so that's another thing to be aware. Are you treading this alone? Are you already matched up with a management team to kind of help you within the space? Because there's pros and cons to both, and you'll find creators that talk about either or. The pro to me is that my platform blew up so quickly. I had zero idea. There was no time for me to learn what to do. I needed somebody to tell me what I needed to be doing. So my management team, luckily, they already have brands reaching out to them to be like, we have this campaign. What creators do you think would work best? And then the management team kind of puts it out that way, and then we get to decide. But the other thing about no's, and this is another thing that Sarah taught me, I'm very grateful, is that you have to, before I quit my job doing accounts receivable, Sarah said, you need to make sure that you have enough money put away so that you never feel desperate when you're creating content. And um, at the time, I was like, okay. She was like, because people will come at you with things worth money that you will want to say no to because it doesn't align with your values. But if you're financially not stable, then you're going to say yes. And then what you're doing is basically watering down your brand. And so what I did before I ever quit my accounts receivable job was banked my salary for the accounts receivable job doing content creation. And when I had banked that, I quit my job so that I knew that if I never made a cent for the rest of the year, that I had that money, I had my salary there. And that really helped me in saying no. Because, you know, there were times where brands would come my direction where I was like, this doesn't really fit like the pillars that I had created for myself. And I got to say no. But saying no to money is hard when you have none or when it is your sole form of income. So I think there's power in no because I don't think this is a game kind of that we're playing for everybody as content creators. Is that when you say yes to X amount of dollars, that kind of devalues other people's work too if you're taking less than what you are worth for your work. And that can become a down, like, and it happens and you see it. You see content creators coming in. It's like, we have budget, but they're doing thousands of dollars of work for $200. And then it's like, well, if they can get you to do it for $200, why would they ever look at anybody else? And so it's one of those things that you kind of have to be like, it's a little bit of both. You kind of got to pick and choose who you're doing it for and when, and also just like understanding that um it it's not you. It's not you. And that's the hard, I think, hard too when you're building your brand on authenticity and on yourself, is that it is us. Like my brand is
It's
me.
me. It's a
It's me.
personality brand.
Right. So when you say no to me, or I have to say no, it feels like it's me. It feels like it's against me, or it feels like it's me that it's saying. But at the end of the day, our brands are businesses too. Like, this is how we're making our money. So being able to separate those is definitely very important.
Let's talk about management. So, because you blew up and you had the following, it was easier for you to get a management company than, say, I would now in this space where it's hard to blow up now.
It's
It's not
all
as
it's all
easy.
it's all relative too, though, because some brands only like, although a brand might come with $50,000 in their budget, they might say they want one large creator and four micro creators. So no matter where you're, again, that's where that niching part of things and that conversion part really comes into play, is that if you have 10,000 followers, but you have a loyal group of 10,000 followers that are engaged in your content, that can be more valuable than somebody who has 100,000 followers where their audience isn't engaged. So content, content managers have a plethora of creators that range from anywhere from 5,000 followers all the way up to their whatever their highest content creator is that they have. So, yes, now that I'm because my platform was bigger at the time, it was easier for me to find management. But at the time, my management had platforms that were smaller than mine. They still have platforms that are smaller than mine. So again, if you believe in your platform, if your people believe in you, and you're slowly steady growing, then it becomes valuable, because even though your partnerships will be on the smaller scale financially, that's still beneficial for a management team. They're still essentially making money off of you.
Well, yeah, because you have an engaged following that converts, right? Because the ultimate goal is, are they going to buy the product? And some people really are just love following certain creators and will do whatever they say. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think the superpower in authenticity is that it's not always about conversion either. For me, it's about sharing brands that feel authentic, and using them regularly, and really having a bond and a story connected to the things that I talk about and use. Because conversion's one thing, but that's brand awareness is also another. And who is bringing awareness to your brand is important. And I think that that's where the authenticity becomes a superpower in these places, that I have a trustworthy voice, because I've always stuck to my morals when it came to the brands that I worked with. I've always stuck to who I was when I was creating content. So when I say something, I know that the majority of my audience trusts that when it comes out of my mouth, because I haven't led them astray before. And there's value in that for brands too, regardless of conversion.
Well, there's huge value in building trust with your audience, and you, as the brand manager of your own personality brand, have to make sure that you maintain that trust. And it could be only one video, however quick it is, that could destroy all of that.
Yeah.
And so do you find it hard sometimes to show up authentically? What do you do on the hard days where you're just like, I just don't even want to do this today? Do you not do it?
It depends on the day, because again, with the authenticity piece, I kind of want to show the bad days too, to an extent. So obviously, if we're talking in the world of branding and creation and brand deals, I have found over the last 5 years that the brands that you work with want you at your best always. So if I'm struggling, I'm able to kind of say, hey, I need extra time for this collab, or I'm not going to meet this deadline. Here's what's going on. Again, that authenticity piece meets me everywhere I go. So, and how I'm creating in the briefs that I get from brands, and how I show up. If I'm having a bad day, you're going to just as quick see me crying on my Instagram
as your stories. I see it all the time.
Yeah. So you're just, I think again, I never wanted, and my goal, and I think I said this to you when we chatted at VidCon, is that I never wanted to disappoint people in person. I never wanted someone to put me on such a high pedestal online and then meet me in person and be like, oh, well, that was disappointing. Because I never wanted them to think that I was ever playing a part, or that I was ever faking any of my emotion or my interactions. And that has done two things for me. One, that has truly helped me rely on myself and really trust myself through this process, is that my brand is myself. So I have to trust my own gut. It's great to hear the noise and have other people share opinions and put that in, but at the end of the day, this is me. I'm not building a character. I'm not building, if I don't trust my own gut, then this is not me. And then the other thing that it's allowed me to do is just always show up as myself. If I want to go to the grocery store in my pajamas and my pimple patches at 10 p.m., I can, because that's not new for you. You've seen that. I've shared that. If I, have a cold, it allows me to always show up as myself, but it has also really challenged me to always trust myself, which was new. When you work in corporate and you work under other people, you're always looking for other people's validation and advice, and is this the right way to do it? Whereas when you only have yourself, you literally only have yourself.
It's all
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Tell you.
You can't, there's no HR to complain to.
No.
It's me. Well, I think that's part of the issue that I'm going through is I have which is a small media company. And so I think my fear was like, who's going to hire somebody who's like, nope, I'm not showing up today. I'm going to fucking put the covers over my head and this is what I'm doing. Or it's just an edit day. I can't even go outside. I think the fear was like, well, who's going to hire somebody that is being honest about not wanting to show up and do the thing for their clients? And it's like, at a certain point in time, I have to show other small business owners or other people that want to be like content creators that like this journey isn't easy. It changes every day, sometimes every 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I may not want to do this today. And that's okay. Like it has to be okay at some point in time to show other people that this journey isn't easy and there's no perfect and the goalpost always moves. Like there's not going to be a finish line. We don't get to the finish line.
It's also really important to remember too that no matter how corporate, no matter how big, no matter how much money, at the root of every brand, of every company, sitting at the top of us as a CEO are people. They're human beings. And they can relate to not wanting to show up. The difference being we just didn't talk about it and we just showed up. And I'm not about that anymore. And I think that there's a lot of creators that are starting to kind of challenge that narrative of like, no, like we don't have to run ourselves into the ground. Like we don't have to. I mean, look what I did. I worked for a brand for 8 years. Sure, I had a great salary towards the end of my time with them. However, I was working 3 times that salary for a company that just walked in one day and said, "Hey, see you later." And like that really put into perspective for me that like working is one thing, but how I show up for myself, how I take care of myself, how I take care of the people that I love, how I show up for my friends and my family. When I die, the work that I did at my corporate job or at the job that my last job, we'll say, will never be as impactful as the legacy I leave in terms of the people that I love, my friends, my family, and taking care of myself. And like the cool part about content creation for me now is that I get to know that the work that I'm doing and how I'm treating my family and showing up for them and myself will both be legacies for me. And I think understanding that in the moment was tough when you're being like handed a paper that says you don't have a job in 3 weeks. Like that's terrifying. When I was quitting my job that I knew was stable money, that was terrifying. But then after after a certain period of time, you're like, well, people aren't going to remember me for the phone call to ask them to pay their bills, but they are going to remember me for showing up online and challenging the way they think, for making them laugh in one of the darkest periods of their life, for showing them how valuable they are. And like, I would take enough money to just survive to get to continue this. And I'm lucky that that's not where I'm living. And I'm very privileged with the fact that this has helped me build a lot of really cool things for myself, my family, etc. But I would rather grind to do this every single day than do what I ever did before. Ever.
That is so funny that you say that because I'm in that terrifying space where I have the money saved. So now I can do this. I can focus on just this. I don't have to chase the clients. I don't have to chase the money. I can literally just focus on content creation. And I said to my husband the other day, I was like, just build me in to your because we own a construction company. I was like, I'll come clean. I'll do whatever. I was like, but I want to be able to make space for this. every day, this is what I want to do. So even if it's not working for your construction company, just cleaning up your sites, maybe it's like door dashing if I have to, right? Like, which is crazy to some people to see that, like, you know, I worked for The View and Barbara Walters and Home Shopping Network and Disney and iHeartMedia and all these big brands, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this work. And I think that's like a huge deal. I think people have to understand.
That just tells me that this is what you want to do. And like, I think that that's kind of where it was for me. And again, I had an express lane in terms of getting there. But once I got to that point, I was like, well, I would do anything to continue doing this anymore. So like continue doing this for the rest of my life. So you kind of just, and it's far more rewarding. And I say that with my whole chest because of all of the work that I've done. Even when I have bad days that are at the hands of the internet, or even when I have the fact that I can slide into my DMs and someone tells me that they've done something differently for themselves because I exist, that's one of the coolest things in the entire world. And I won't get that doing anything else.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
So it makes me feel good because I know I'm on the right track. I talked to somebody the other day who he's like, my business was doing horrible. So I started driving Uber because this is what I had to do to make ends meet because this is the thing I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it was so refreshing to hear somebody say that because I was like, oh my God, everybody would fake it and pretend like everything's fine. But you flat out just told me you lost millions of dollars. This business went down the drain while you're building something else up that you really want to focus on. Instead of just getting another corporate job, you're driving Uber to make ends meet. Like,
yeah,
that was mind blowing to me because nobody's being honest in this world of business about how hard it is. I finally talked to somebody in one of my podcast episodes where I said we had to go into our savings account to pay freelancers who were making more money that month than I did, which was so hard. And he's like, oh God, I have to go through that all the time. I'm like, why do people not talk about that? It's so crazy to me. I'm like, why are we not being honest about how hard all of this is?
I think that for the content creation space and for me specifically, that the pandemic was a big eye-opener for a lot of people. Especially in our bodies, a lot of people started to struggle with their bodies that had never struggled with their bodies ever in their 30 plus years of life. And it really put things into perspective for people. A lot of people were lonely for the first time. A lot of people weren't able to, a lot of extroverts like me were stuck introverting, and it was awful. And it just, I think it really did kind of put a new lens on what people do share, because I think there was a switch that flicked where people are like, well, I don't want to see how good your life is because that's not the truth. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, struggling through a pandemic was a struggle for anybody. It didn't really matter how much money you had at that point. Like, we were all in the same boat. And I think it kind of really put things into perspective for people of like, well, I don't want to come to social media because social media was all we had. I think people were starting to realize, oh, I feel bad about myself when I leave my social pages, or when I'm scrolling, like, I don't feel good. And for me, when this was blowing up, I was like, you know, we are the ones who are in control of our social media. You're in charge of it. It's the one place in your life where you get to decide for 90% of the content that you consume what it is. So why would you ever want to be consuming content that made you feel bad about who you are? And I think a lot of people really honed in on that. So they were unfollowing people that were just showing the good in everything. And they were following people who are willing to say, this is shitty. Like, this is really shitty right now. Or I'm really struggling, because people could resonate with that. And because it made people feel like they were normal in a space where a lot of the times we feel less than. So I do think it has started to move in a different direction. Business wise and corporately, that's definitely different. On a smaller scale, for me, it's easier. But that being said, I do have a lot of brands that I work with that have allowed me to be more honest in talking about them and have been more honest with me behind closed doors. So I do think it's starting to shift, but yeah, I think that there's always room for more truth.
Honesty. Yeah. Just being
Yeah,
honest.
yeah,
Let's talk about time. I was fascinated that my normal 8 hour day in corporate is nothing like the 24/7 of content creation. When you
yeah.
wake up and your whole day is ahead of you, how do you manage your time? Like, I'm going to blink and it's going to be 4 o'clock and my kids are coming home from school.
Yeah.
How
It,
do you manage time?
it depends on what type of content creation you're doing and how you want to manage it. Also, your lifestyle, like, excuse me. There are so many variables when it comes to content creation and timing wise. For instance, for me, I'm a night owl. I love to be up until 3 o'clock in the morning. I can sit on the couch while we mindlessly watch TV and work, edit, caption, write, research within a small period of time for me, but at night in the evenings. Um, it's about finding what works best for you, and I think that that's really the most important part about this is that you have to you have to find where your brain works the best depending on what your goals are within that realm, and you have to shift accordingly, and that for some people means juggling having the kids home or having that is a part of it, but the luxury of it is that you get to decide, so you get to pick and choose those things. And what worked well for me at the beginning is not what works well for me now, and I think that is we're stuck in this mindset of like a corporate 9 to 5. You come in, you get up in the morning, you get ready for work, you drink your coffee, you drive there, you have a set schedule of things you have to do. Content creation doesn't work that way, because especially if you're in our spaces where you're creating on like world events, things that are funny, like you have to be able to navigate and flip the switch as you're going. But then that also means that when you want to show up for your kids, or when I want to show up for my nephew, that I have the luxury of deciding when I can and can't do that. And like that's been obviously the biggest thing for me. But when I quit my job and I started content creation full time, my mom sent me a text message, and I really wish I would have saved it, that said, "Congratulations on your new job. Your boss is a bitch." And I said, "But I'm my boss." And she was like, "You're right. And you'll never work harder for anybody like you will for yourself." And I was like, "Oh, like, yeah." I was like, "Oh, and my parents own their own business, and they do their own stuff." And I just that was the moment that I realized, like, okay, like I've been viewing this as like, nice, this is the switch that I need. But then she was like, "Yeah, but you're gonna work harder now than you ever did, because you now at the end of the day, everything you do will benefit you and the people you love, not a corporate company, not a brand that holds you for no value." And like that's when I was like, you're right. Like this is we're celebrating, but like let's be honest, this is still going to be work at the end of the day. The luxury of that is that I get to pick and choose where I spend my time and when I spend it, and yeah, I am a bitch. I do make myself work harder in certain periods. I am the person who holds myself back. I am the person who doubts myself. I am the person who writes myself up when I don't do things right. Like I am the person who does all of that now. And like that moment when she said, "Congratulations, like you're working for yourself now, but your boss is a bitch," was like a reality check. Cool, you're working for yourself, but let's be real, this is going to be harder than anything you've ever done. And like it really truly 100% has.
But how amazing is that you have parents that understand that space of being an entrepreneur and owning your own business?
Yeah.
Because I have parents that came up old school, right? Like I was born in 1975, so you worked for a corporation your whole
Yeah.
life, you put money in a 401k and you get a pension, and I hope you can retire before you die. That
Yeah.
is my parents. So they don't understand this. This is
Yeah.
something that they can't tell their friends about, right?
Yeah.
Like, "Hey, mom, I have a podcast. Can you subscribe?" What does that mean? It's like, oh my God. So I'm living in this weird space of like, can my parents even be proud of me when they have no idea what I'm doing right now?
And here's the thing. I am very lucky that my parents always, never in my life have my parents ever said, "Don't chase your dreams, do what you want." Does that change the fact that their natural reaction as a parent is to want stability for me? No. When I said I was going to quit my job, my dad said, "Well, why don't you just keep it?" Until and I said, and bless his whole heart, but he was the one who told me when I was 17 years old that there's not a lot of opportunities in life to quit a job. You won't have very many opportunities in life to quit a job for any what reason. And I made him eat those words when we were sitting at the dinner table. And I said, you told me that I won't have many opportunities in my life to quit my job. This is an opportunity that I have to do that for whatever reason it is. And it was still abstract. And like my parents didn't know then what I was doing. They just trusted me. And I had to very much, my parents grew up with nothing. They weren't able to afford to go to university and do those things. So they've always worked as hard as they could to make sure that I always had those things. And then somewhere along the way, they forgot that I am the truest form of their daughter. I want to work hard and like I want to do my own thing. And so sitting down with them was not easy to be like, yeah, I'm quitting the security that I have. You just watched me lose my job. You had to support me for a year. And then here I am coming to you being like, oh, I'm going to quit another job to do something that I can't even properly vocally explain to you. Um, but there's moments and they'll realize, and it was like 9 months into content creating, 9 or 10 months into content creating, we were walking on the waterfront. I was with my mom and my dad and Scott, and a woman approached me and she was like, I have to stop you. I don't even think she realized my parents were with me. And she was like, I have to stop you. I have to tell you, I have an eating disorder. And for the last 7 years of my life, I've really struggled. And I came across your content last year. And I've been working with my therapist along with my doctor to really get myself out of this. And she said, and I can like finally say that how I feel about my body now versus last year is completely different. And that's because of your content. She's sobbing. I'm sobbing. We're just like both having this moment. And I turn and I'm like, oh, these are my parents. And my mom and dad are both sobbing. And I was like, and I think at that time I was really struggling with like, how can you be proud of me if this is so abstract? How can you see how beneficial the work is that I'm doing if it's so abstract? And then in that moment, like I remember looking at my parents and being like, and these are my parents, and they're both crying, and just being after that moment being like, how could you not know that what I do is important after being a part of a conversation like that? And I think that that was definitely the moment for them where they realized that like money is one thing, but like the actual impact that I was having on human beings is what was driving me to continue to do what I was doing. So yeah, even though they're wonderful and they said go for it and we're proud of you and this is going to be hard, um, they still didn't understand it until like there were moments. And there's always little things like getting to take her, like I got to take my mom to New York, and like those moments I think too are the moments where you're like, okay, well this is the tangible monetary, this is where I can see that you're making money when we're able to have these experiences and go do those things. But I think for a parent, and if we got it bad, our parents got it worse. And I always have to say that because it always comes from a place of they were taught that stability was the most important thing. And we're in a place where we're challenging that. I don't think stability is the most important thing. I don't think our economy is stable. So why does my income need to be, I think that that's like where it comes from a place of love and wanting you to always feel like you have what you need. But sometimes money and stability is not what you need. Sometimes what you need is for what you're doing to have a meaning and a purpose and resonate with you. And like, yeah, so don't get lost in the fact that they might not understand, because there will be a moment where they will. And what that is for everybody is a little bit different. Whether that's someone you interview, whether that's a brand that you get to work with, whatever. There's little moments for everybody in my life. You know, and that's just that's what those people need to understand and to realize how serious this actually is. And I also had to wrap my mind around the fact that sometimes people just will never understand. And that's not me. That's them. And like I used to spend a lot of time hoping that everybody would buy into what I was doing and that all of my friends and all of my family would would cheer and be excited and understand, and that's just not the case. I have to be the loudest, and again, I have to be the person that's cheering myself on, because sometimes I will make decisions that people won't understand, but I have to be right with them, and I think that that's like a big deal. But yeah, but from our parents, it comes from a place of love and just the way that they were 100% raised, and I have to be okay with that uncomfortable feeling because I don't want to do it that way. So this feeling of them not understanding and this feeling of will they ever be proud of me, that is not you. That's them. That's a them thing. I'm doing what I love, and I have to be okay with you not understanding that because I get it.
I love that. The two things that I say all the time. I can't help how I'm perceived, right? Because you're going to perceive me however you want to in your own way, my parents or otherwise. And then I'm my own biggest fan. And I will say the whole time, I'm like, I'm my own biggest fan. I like my own stuff. I'll comment on my own
You
stuff.
have
Like,
to.
I like what I'm doing. And that's just the space that I'm in right now, is that I like what I'm doing. I am my biggest
Yeah.
fan. And beyond that, I can't help who likes it, who doesn't like it, who subscribes, who doesn't subscribe. It's the craziest thing. I want to talk about Scott a little bit because obviously you've looped him into the brand. He's always been a part of it. Has he quit his job? Are we doing more couples things together? Like, how do we see the brand progressing? Like, what is on the list for 2025 and beyond for you?
So he did quit his job, but he quit his job 2 years ago. 2 years ago. And if I'm being fully transparent, it was less about content creation. It was more for my mental health. I just he was working full we when we were working both of our jobs 9 to 5 before I lost it, we saw each other for a small period of time. We've been together for a very long time, but we he would drop me off at work in the morning. I wouldn't get picked up until 8:30. Sometimes we'd work out at that time, and then we'd get home at 11, which is why we've always been night owls, because that's the only time we ever spent together. Through the pandemic, that changed, and I think that changed for a lot of couples, but we spent so much time together, and I was like, we really do like each other. This is it was a confirmation for a lot of people, and I was like, why are we spending so much time apart when and so I struggled through my first seasonal depression 3 years ago, and it was awful. It was the worst thing I've ever experienced, which comes along with this territory of content creation. And I said to him the following winter, I'm going away. I was like, I don't care if you come. I don't want to like guilt you into this. This is like he was doing construction, and he's a personal trainer, and I obviously see he has clients, and I just said, you know, I can't be alone this winter. Like I can't be alone like I was last year. So I have to go and be in the sun with people, or I you need to quit your job and we need to, figure it out. And we were at that point. We were very much at the point where I was making enough money that we could afford that. Like it wasn't like this was a surprise, but he had been doing his jobs for a long time. So asking your partner to give up something, that's like that was a new transition for us, because in my mind, if I could not work, I would just do that. But him, again, his personality is so rooted in being being useful,
Being of service. I mean, that's what
yeah,
construction is. We have a construction company. It's so hard
acts
for
of
my husband to
service.
not be of service.
Yeah, but and we also had to look at it from a standpoint. He loved everything else that we were doing, so he loved when we would get to go away and explore the world, and he was kind of leaving both Yeah, like half in, half out. So I was like, let's just give it a try. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Knock on wood, it has worked, and he has not gone back. And so yeah, and then that allowed him to be in more and show up more within my content. So that has changed a lot for him. Um, my husband is an introvert, and I am an extrovert. And I coined this statement a few years ago about how grateful I was to have um, a partner who was so willing to step outside of their comfort zone for me to shine in mine. Um, and I will forever be grateful for that. Like, that's super important. So I'm sure people have noticed over the last little bit, he's been in a lot more content. Again, full transparency, he was very and has been and struggled with his own insecurity when it comes to his teeth. So he played hockey all growing up, um, and never smiled in anything. He didn't want to show up in things that he needed to talk in, um, and this was like a big learning thing from. I've been with him for 18 years. I could care less, like I could care less. I don't think I ever actually noticed, and I know that people in our life have never actually noticed, but he never smiled. And people on it was starting to get to a point where people were noticing that and then trying to be malicious about it on the online space. So I was like, well, let's just go then. Like, let's go, let's plan, and like, let's do what you need to do so that you can feel as confident as you should feel. And I never realized this, but I used to call him one liner Len. And because we would be in a room full of people, and he would just absorb, and then he would just say one thing, and it would be funnier than anything that had been said all night. And I'll be like, people are never going to remember me because you just dropped that one line. Um, and I have now since realized, after all of the work both of us have had to do, like to navigate like this with his change and how he feels about himself, and is that like he's never really been a one liner Len. He just always needed what he was going to say to overpower his need to not be seen. And I was like,
Wow. Wow.
oh, I I've been calling you that for such a period of time that I like, and I had to I had to spend a little bit of time apologizing to him for like what I think I contributed to a lot of that, of his
That
own.
insecurity.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong, we never talked about it. He never mentioned it. We had never had big conversations about it, and I'm very grateful that it got hashed up the way that it did so that we could talk about it. But yeah, so he went, and we're still in the process, but he went and got his teeth fixed, and that's why over the last 5 months you have seen him more in everything, in more photos and more stuff. So I think for 2025, that's where I'm most excited, is that he can get to show. Here I am with a whole ass platform about showing up as your authentic self, and I wasn't even able to create space for him to do that. And then now he can, and I think that that's really exciting for 2025 for us, for the brand, for the two of us. I have a podcast called Your Two Cents that I do with a friend of mine, Sylvia, where we talk about like money, and we are no money experts, so we get other experts to come and talk about it. But again, creating room for truth and honesty is kind of where my heart lies. So money wise, I think that that's another thing that we don't talk about, that we're not truthful about, that we don't get to be transparent about. And I think, especially with debt and trying to buy a house in this economy, and what it looks like renting versus buying, and just all of those things, that so I get to do that, and we're excited for 2025 because we have some cool things on the go with that. We signed with the iHeartRadio to,
Yay!
yeah,
Congratulations.
thank
That's
you,
amazing.
which is really cool. So to have something like that. But for me, for 2025, I think our goal is to really build our brand, for Scott and I to build our brand together, and to really focus on the things that we love doing together. And that's festivals, country music, concerts, comedy, and like we've kind of got some cool things nailed down for the year, which I'm excited about. But honestly, with content creation and this realm of this world, my goal every year is just to continue to be myself. And like after year two, I realized that that's the hardest thing to do in content creation. And that's will always have to be at the forefront of just continuing to be myself, because although the pressures change, there's always a force that, is trying to challenge who, and I talked to you about this. I know when we talked at VidCon, just what I deal with online bullying and stuff like that. So like that's always my goal. My goal is to never lose who I am, and my goal is to always continue to show up and not allow the opinions of others to impact that ever going forward. So
I love
that's
that.
yeah.
Do you see yourself eventually building something physical, like I guess what is the easiest thing to pitch to would be clothing line, right? Like book.
Yeah.
Are we going to create something physical under the brand that people can buy from you?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I have lots of big dreams. It's just finding where they fit in. Again, like the beauty of having an audience is that um, I have this really cool support system and people who want to show up, but I also don't want to exhaust my audience too. Like I'm not naive to the fact that we're living in a really rough um, economy right now and have been for a little while. And I think too, like picking and choosing what I'm putting out that's going to have the highest value, and also be affordable for people is important to me too. So I don't want to rush into anything. As of 2025, I will officially be a part owner of Sear Nutrition, which is the brand that
That's
I've been working
incredible. Oh
with.
my gosh, that's
So
incredible. Congratulations.
thank you. So that's exciting, that, and like that's just a pure example of me working for a brand that, like, again, I truly believe in them. I truly believe in the team, and they're on a big growth spurt, and the salary that they were paying me last year, I just kind of at the end of this year, a few months ago, I sat down to say, I'm already doing this work. I'm already using these products. I already believe in it. And we just sat down and had a conversation where I said, how about I take a percentage of the company moving forward instead of an actual payment, and we use the salary that you've been paying me and invest it in other things to build a brand, because it didn't make sense. And there's just a lot of cool things that we could be doing with that money. Once I was sitting there being like, I'm already doing this anyways. I already believe in this brand, so like let's figure out a way to I have royalties through that brand specifically for my products. So it's not like I'd be losing a large chunk of money financially. I could end up making more if the money gets used properly. So, which is really cool. And we actually signed on as the sole sponsor for Cavendish Beach Music Festival here on the East Coast for the hydrate as a hydration
That's
sponsor.
huge.
Yeah, it's
Oh
massive.
my
So
gosh.
it's the first time Cavendish Beach Music Festival has ever had a hydration sponsor, and it'll be our first major sponsorship. But we'll get to really step out with the brand and be a part of that. So
That is so cool.
now I get to
Like,
combine myself, my love of country music, my brands. So yeah, so I think for me this year is about really establishing both Scott and I in content, and figuring out how that works for both of us, the things that we want to, I know what I like doing, but like finding what he's comfortable with and us doing together, continuing going forward, which is kind of like a clean slate for both of us, which is cool. And then, uh, yeah, just focusing specifically on, um, being myself, and then figuring out what that was. Like, I want a book. I wanted a love me journal. That's something that I have had built for a while. I want a clothing line or a clothing collab with a brand. Um, but those are like, on the grand scheme of things, those are great. But like I just want to continue to find ways to have an impact on the people's lives that choose to follow me and give me their time. And yeah, that's the struggle, like finding ways to be creative and uh make sure that people see the value in my content and me, and just always striving to be better than last year's version of myself.
Alicia, thank you so much. I will put all the links to all the things. I love you so much. Thank you so much for always being there for your community.
Thanks for having me.